Our first company for today's webinar is Emyria, ASX code EMD, with a market capitalization of around $18.8 million. Emyria accelerates drug development by bringing together patients, researchers, and medical innovators. Presenting today is Michael Winlo, Managing Director. Thank you, Michael. Over to you.
Marvellous. Thank you, Peter. And so great to be speaking with you this afternoon. The team at Emyria are really proud of the hard work we're doing and the mission that we have ahead of us. I can't wait to tell you all about it. Next slide, please. Letting you know that we'll be talking about some unapproved medications. This deck is available on our ASX platform. So Emyria is a healthcare company, and we're really proud that our largest institutional investor is 10 Mile. This is the VC venture fund of the Andrew Forrest family, making Andrew Forrest one of our largest shareholders. Market cap of just under $18 million with lots of headroom to grow. Next slide, please. So this is the chart that catches our attention and calls us to action at Emyria. This is a rising incidence of mental health, now our number one chronic mental health challenge in Australia, particularly prevalent amongst young people. And if you're an astute investor, you probably look at a lot of charts. This is one that tells us what the future could look like. And it gives us a hint that we need better treatments and approaches for this rising challenge. Next slide, please. So at Emyria, our goal is to radically transform mental health. We're first targeting post-traumatic stress disorder care by delivering and developing new treatments that profoundly improve patient well-being and the quality of life. If we go to the next slide, please. Our first big challenge that we're tackling is post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a chronic, debilitating condition that can arise after exposure to a traumatic event or repeated exposures over a period of time. So not unsurprisingly, this is a very prevalent condition amongst first responders and our military veterans, but also victims of assault can also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. In fact, the incidence is rising worldwide. About 7% of Australian adults have this, making this a really costly and challenging mental health problem. Next slide, please. But one of the great limitations is that our treatments are not very good, and we haven't been particularly innovative over the last couple of decades. Typically, treatments for PTSD are thought of as being drug treatments, typically your antidepressants, that create side effects, and for about a third of patients are not very effective. And in fact, somewhat surprisingly, there has been no new drug treatment for PTSD in over 20 years. If you go to the next slide, please, we can see that the other approach typically is therapy, which can be effective for certain patients, but it is intensive, it's quite involved, and there's a high dropout rate for that approach. Next slide, please. So what we really need is a new approach. And so we are focused on this combining of drug treatment and psychological support to make a radical new difference. And there's some new approaches emerging in this field that are showing tremendous promise. And next slide, please. In one of those, and then we go to the next slide, is MDMA-assisted therapy. So this is the careful co-administration of MDMA, otherwise known as ecstasy, alongside intensive psychotherapeutic support. So that might sound quite alarming to people, but MDMA has these really unique qualities of decreasing fear responses, increasing empathy, and allowing psychotherapy to be more effective. And what the research is showing is that in just 3 carefully managed dosing sessions alongside intensive wraparound psychotherapeutic support, we can have a dramatic and radical improvement in people's PTSD symptoms and quality of life. If we go to the next slide, please, we can see where some of that data is taking us. So a couple of major phase 3 trials in the US have concluded, showing more than 80% of patients getting a clinically significant benefit from this treatment, and more than 2/3 effectively going into remission after just 3 sessions. If we go to the next slide, please. When we compare that to the gold standard therapeutic approaches, we can see a much higher remission rate with the bar chart on the left, and importantly, a much lower dropout rate on the right. So we're really seeing, for the first time in a long time, perhaps a really promising emerging treatment for PTSD. If we go to the next slide, please. But one of the complications is delivering this treatment and figuring out how we can provide it in a scalable, commercially viable way. And we think we have the solution to that. If we go to the next slide, please. So one of the key advantages that Emyria has is we operate in a jurisdiction that allows illegal access to these treatments. Remarkably, Australia shocked the world last year, being the first jurisdiction globally to create a legal access pathway to these treatments under carefully managed and strict controls. In fact, the FDA is still far behind. In fact, they may be 5 years away from making a similar move, giving Australia a really unique and significant head start in this space. Next slide, please. And so Emyria has been hard at work for the last year, solving the delivery challenges. We have a skilled and multidisciplinary clinical team. In fact, we own and operate our own medical centres, where we've trained more than 20 clinicians and comprising therapists and specialist psychiatrists. We have a secure supply of GMP-grade medicines, which we've secured from a key supplier in Canada, Pharmala. And we have the evidence-based and ethics-approved care protocols that have been in action now. We've got a method to help patients access funding to be able to provide treatment, and we've built dedicated fit-for-purpose facilities. If you go to the next slide, please. And one of our most remarkable units is the MPAC Centre here in West Leederville, where we've provisioned multiple rooms to be able to provide this therapy in a really safe, careful environment, and equipping those with technology so that we can observe what's happening and improve our care models over time. And we believe we have a model that's ready to scale nationally. If you go to the next slide, please. And also our real world data, the outcomes from our own program is showing remarkable clinical efficacy. All patients that have gone through this treatment so far, we've had 8 completely complete the program and currently 5 in treatment, but all of the 8 that have completed treatment are now in follow-up, have had a more than 60% improvement in their PTSD symptoms. And if we go to the next slide, please, we can also see that we've also made a massive difference to their quality of life as these individuals get their function back. If you go to the next slide, please. There's a case study here of Kate, a first responder, not atypically, challenged with PTSD after many years of exposure through her role, tried many therapies and treatments without much success. And if you go to the next slide, please, we can see a little bit what her treatment journey looked like. By going back in time, we can see where her PTSD scores were in the 5 years before she started treatment. Serious, significant PTSD symptoms, preventing her from going to work, preventing her from forming relationships, and then within just a few months after starting treatment, a massive, profound turnaround for this individual. And I'm really pleased to say that she's now back in gainful employment after going through this program. And this is something that we're really hoping that we can optimize for more patients. If you go to the next slide, please. Great. So in the next slide, we'll explain a little bit of our strategy for making global impact. The first focus for us right now is to establish and grow these clinics, engage payers with the great data that we're collecting. Our main targets are the workers' comp insurers, private health, and of course, government. If we go to the next slide, please. One of the key things in our DNA is to collect really good data about what we're doing and develop new treatments. MDMA-assisted therapy is just the beginning of this new paradigm. There'll be new treatments, new therapeutic approaches, and we expect to be able to lead the development and further improvement of these approaches to help more patients. That will allow us to scale this program nationally as well and beyond. If you go to the next slide, please. We believe our innovation pipeline can generate licensable and commercializable IP that we can take globally for large impact and value. If you go to the next slide, please. We just touch on one of our key programs that I do want to highlight here is that in the background, we're also looking at making improvements already today to MDMA to actually adjust the way it behaves, to improve its safety profile and overall applications for many psychiatric and neurological disorders. This is a program we've been doing with the University of Western Australia and the NIH in the US for the last 3 years. We've got really robust IP behind this, and it's part of our long-term innovation value proposition from our company. If we go to the next slide, please. We've got an amazing world-class team that can help us take us through these strategic moves. Greg Hutchison is the CEO of Sonic Health Plus, experienced in growing and scaling national clinical services. Sir John Took, knighted for services to medicine, expert in learning health systems. Dr. Karen Smith, a biopharma executive, has taken multiple drugs through FDA approval. And Dr. Mohit Kaushal, an IT executive who has scaled IT-backed healthcare services businesses nationally in the US as well. So an excellent world-class team to guide us through the things we need to do. Next slide, please. And so finally, what to look forward to in the next 6 months, the big catalyst: major hospital partnerships, major payer engagement on the back of our great clinical outcomes, that being a catalyst for us launching additional therapeutic programs and expanding our site locations. If you go to the next slide, please. Pleasingly, from an investor point of view, much of this activity is supported by growing service revenues from our already very active clinical service programs. If you go to the next slide here, on the drug development front, we know we have secure IP for MDMA analogues. We're advancing to Tier 3 of the NIH and look out for a commercialization agreement with UWA. And if we go to the next slide, we can see that a lot of these drug development activities, including the key proof of concept studies, are being funded by grants. And then that's me wrapped up. I can see Peter's back on the screen. But lots to look out for in the next few months. And the last couple of slides will just say that this model, we believe, will not only help us tackle PTSD, but sets us up to be able to tackle many adjacent major unmet needs in mental health also. Thanks for your time.
Michael, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I just want to talk about your big news this week, which was announcing the promising interim clinical results for that PTSD program. Can you explain what the results were, firstly, in a bit more detail, and explain what this means for Emyria as a whole?
Absolutely. So to date, there have been a couple of major phase 3 trials done in the United States looking at this intervention for PTSD. What this was really the first real evidence that we can achieve very similar results, profound clinical improvement, lasting durable benefit for patients in a real world clinical delivery setting here in Australia. And so that was really reaffirming that we could see some of these great outcomes translate into the real world. It's the kind of thing that people were hoping to see, but now gives us validation of our approach, of our model, and allows us to approach payers and other parties and providers to help adopt and scale up this treatment to hopefully benefit more patients.
And Michael, MDMA therapy is obviously exciting in many ways, and a clear focus for you guys. But I just want to know which countries permit such a therapy.
Australia is really the only one that's got a formally established legal access pathway. Lots of hurdles one needs to get through to be able to provide that. We've solved those hurdles, so we really have a head start here. But in all other countries, you can only really get access to this treatment through clinical trials or in compassionate access scenarios in some countries in Europe only. So it's really limited. So we have this really world-class, almost once in a lifetime opportunity to evaluate these treatments, deliver them to patients in need, help many patients, but also learn and improve these treatment approaches for the benefit of the world.
And Michael, just looking at your results, what was the main driver in seeing the company cross $1 million in clinical billings for the first time ever in that June quarter?
Yeah, so I mean, there's been high demand, particularly for our mental health services. That's been growing at our clinical operations, and so I think as our reputation has been growing, as people see that we're taking on new approaches, really trying to tackle these difficult, hard to treat conditions, we're getting the support demand from the referral network, and I expect that to grow each quarter.
Perfect. And just in relation to the opening of the first MPAC Centre, can you explain how that's going and what the significance of this is?
Yeah, the MPACS is a fit-for-purpose facility. We learned early on we need a special space to be able to provide these treatments. The setting really matters. The environment by which you provide these treatments matters. But also it's a really significant resource that most busy therapists and doctors just don't have available for them. So we've built a dedicated space to be able to provide and evaluate these treatments. Opened in April, we've taken a number of patients through the program already, 8 fully through, 5 currently in treatment, more on the way. And we have got this great infrastructure now that allows us to provide, test and improve these treatments. And then we see a model that can work commercially, that can be moved into other states and expanded around the country. And that's what we hope to do for the rest of the year.
And Michael, just lastly, in the quarter, you obviously hired a general manager to drive growth, but looking at more broadly, where will we see growth come from for the company moving forward?
Yeah, growth will come from a couple of major catalysts. Unlocking payer engagement is a significant one. That takes away one of the last key hurdles to access here, which is really around funding. Then it's really about capacity building. So intelligent partnerships with private hospitals, opening up our own sites around Australia to open up capacity, that's going to drive growth. And then over the long term, all of the data and intelligence we can gather from our clinical services, driving and informing our IP pipeline around new drug treatments, new care models, all of which will set us apart and hopefully deliver tremendous patient impact and value for our shareholders.
Michael, thank you so much for your time today. Have a great weekend.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for the interest. Cheers.